Hey, y'all, welcome to the What's Up with Yoga podcast. I'm your host, Kim Struglinski, and this episode is the third episode that I'm recording. I think it's also the third episode that you'll hear. And this episode is about what's up with owning a yoga studio. First of all, if you're enjoying this podcast, I would love it if you could follow us or subscribe on Apple Podcasts, give us a rating, a review, all that jazz, 5 stars, please. I'm coming to you with my emotional support Spindrift. It's cosmopolitan flavored, and also my emotional support cookies that I got at the grocery store today. I have a feeling that's going to be my intro, if you will, as I'm going to tell you what my emotional support thing is each week. I bet you most of the time it's going to be some kind of food, but we'll have to explore that together. Okay, so today's episode is what's up with owning a yoga studio. I'm not going to lie. When I first opened my yoga studio in let's go with end of 2019, because that's when I really started to figure out like what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do this. When I first opened the studio, my initial reaction to opening a yoga studio was, why doesn't everyone do this? Why doesn't every yoga teacher just open their own studio? I'm the kind of person who I'm laughing because I'm doing this with my own podcast, but I'm the kind of person who likes to sort of leap and then see what happens as the net appears as I go. I have a joke with a bunch of my friends that if you hang out enough with me, you will quit your job. And there's a lot of people that have quit their jobs after hanging out with me. So if you want to quit your job, keep listening. Not really, but kind of. So I'm very much the kind of person that I do something first. I try something first. I iterate, and then I just figure out how to do it better. I'm not someone who likes to have a perfect plan. It actually really stresses me out to try to follow a very perfect plan. That's just not who I am as a human. I like to have like 50 to 80% of a plan and then just go the rest on vibes. So when I opened my yoga studio, my initial reaction to opening a business was like, how hard can it be? Everyone does it. And I just figured I would figure it out as I went. Spoiler alert, I made a lot of mistakes. There were a lot of challenging things that happened. And at the same time, I'm so grateful for all those lessons, and they've all gotten me to where I am. So what's up with owning a yoga studio? I think one of the big things, like I said already, is that I just figured every yoga teacher would want to have their own studio because they would want to do things their own way. And that's the biggest reason that I opened my own studio, was because I've worked at a bunch of different studios and I've learned a lot from all of them. I've taken bits that I really liked from certain studios and incorporated them into my own studio, how I run my studio. I also took notes on what I didn't want to do, how I didn't like being treated as an instructor, as an employee, as a contractor. And that is just as important as knowing what I did want, right? So knowing how I didn't want to treat teachers who work for me and how I did want to treat people was step one. I think it's really interesting, and this is kind of a bigger conversation that I've had with a lot of my fitness industry friends, that you can tell when a studio is run by someone who is a teacher versus when a studio is run by someone who wants to make money off of owning a yoga studio. One of the things I will say up front right away is that this is not like a get rich quick scheme. Most people who are in the fitness world are not doing it because we want to make oodles and oodles of money. We do this, and I do this because I've seen the magic of how yoga makes people feel, how much better people's bodies feel, how much easier they're able to go through their everyday life. And that is the reason that I do this. Yes, I want to be able to pay the bills. I want to make a living. I want to be able to pay my teachers well, and I want to be able to give them raises and everything. And also, I'm not doing this for the money. I think my very first thing that I would say to anyone who's thinking about opening a studio is, if you're opening a studio to get rich, or even just to like make a quick profit, it's not the thing to do. It's an expensive endeavor. It's expensive financially. It's also expensive energetically. It's expensive time-wise. I joke sometimes that I quit my 9-to-5 job working for someone else to work 24/7 for myself. And that's really true. Like, even when I think I'm going to get a day off, or when I think I've scheduled a day off, like something happens. And that's okay. That works. But also then I can like go grocery shopping on a Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. like I did today. It's really nice to not have to necessarily report to someone too. So that's another piece of it for me. So part one, I started Heart of Wisdom Yoga because I saw a gap in the market. So the first gap in the market that I saw that I talked a little bit about when we were talking about our story of Heart of Wisdom Yoga, the first gap in the market that I saw was yoga for equestrians. And I'm going to be really honest with you about why I pivoted away from that and why I moved into a brick and mortar space. I think that while I had a really deep connection to the equestrian community, being a competitive equestrian, growing up, riding on the highest levels nationally here, I don't ride anymore, partly because it's really hard on my body. I had a horse of a lifetime. His name was Wacky. And once he retired, and he's now passed away, unfortunately, it just like didn't feel the same. And that was a part of my life that I really, really loved. I will always have a soft spot for the horse world. And at the same time, I'm not in that world anymore. I think if I had started the company and also been an active rider, my mom and I used to joke that like if people could see me ride, they would want to hire me as a yoga teacher because I get it, right? Like I am and was a talented horseback rider. And I've been through all of going to nationals, going to finals, being up all night to prep the horses, having horses get hurt, going in and having a round really depend on you delivering. Like I have been in it. And at the same time, I'm just not in that world right now. I don't know what's going on in the horse world. I'm pretty disconnected. And I think that's part of why it was a little bit harder for me to kind of like dive in and go for it there, partly because I was working with a specific geographic area. And also there was no name recognition. Nobody knew me in that world anymore, especially down here. If I had tried to do this when I was, 19, fresh out of my junior years up in New Jersey, back in 2009, that would have been a really different story, right? Because I knew a lot of people. I had a network. So one of the things that I keep coming back to these days, especially because I see it with myself and I see it with other people, and it's related to this topic, is the idea that it's not about who you know, it's about who knows you. And that's part of the marketing behind studios. That's part of just the dirty word networking that we all talk about, right? Like, it's not just about who you know and whose number you have on your phone. What matters in business is who knows you, who recommends you to their friends, who comes to your class, who maybe takes your class once and then sends a bunch of their friends to your classes. I have had personal trainers, massage therapists, physical therapists take my class maybe once or twice. They don't become a regular client, but then they send people that train with them, that work with them, to us because they know what we deliver and they really like what we deliver. So part of it is not about who you know, it's about who knows you. And that's something that was missing for me with the horseback riding world and launching yoga for equestrians, because I had to like explain my credentials. You want to have that instant trust or that demonstrated knowledge, ability. It's that know, like, trust factor, right? And I didn't necessarily have that in the horseback riding world anymore. And that's okay. And I could have built it up, but would have been a lot of work. And so then I pivoted and I went into the brick and mortar space. And again, this was a interesting choice looking back on it. I opened a studio in Franklin. I didn't live in Franklin. I lived in Nashville. For those of you who are not familiar with Nashville, Franklin's about 25 miles south of downtown Nashville. It's its own sort of suburb of Nashville. And while plenty of people commute from like Franklin to Brentwood or Franklin to Nashville for work, they're definitely specific communities, right? So like the people who live in Franklin know each other. I have realized how big my network in Nashville has gotten over the last 10 years in the fact that I run into people I know all the time. And that's important because that's how you find your clients. That's how you find your people. That's how you find the people that want to be your students, right? So this was another sort of mistake that I made that I didn't know I was making, was I went into a community where I didn't know anyone and I didn't have any network yet. And that's okay. Like, you can grow a business, and we did grow very fast from opening on January 1st. One of the things we had in our favor in that location was that we were in a really great location that got a lot of car and foot traffic all the time. So we never did ads, paid ads. We, just ran social media and everything like that. But we had a banner outside that I paid like $65 for. And that banner just paid for itself over and over because when people saw our signage, they Googled us and they wanted to come in and take a class. So location was so key for us there. And that was something that was a mixed bag in a way for us because we ended up leaving that location. But one other thing that was really challenging for me in 2020 was opening the studio in a place where I didn't really have a network, and then also having to pivot to go online right away. We opened January 1st of 2020. About 3.5 months later, we went virtual and I started teaching all these online classes. And that was really great because people from all over the country, my friends and contacts from all over the country, were able to join those. And at the same time, I was still trying to market to people in Franklin. So it was this interesting, who's my audience thing. And that was a challenge from the beginning of, ideally, you want to get really clear about who your audience was. And I was kind of promoting to two different audiences, right? So I had these virtual classes that were nationwide, could have been worldwide even. And then I also had this local community that I was trying to get in touch with, that when you can't do physical events, free classes, pop-ups, when you just don't have people coming in person, you don't get to know people. And so that makes that really hard. So there's a whole other podcast to be done about lessons from going from in-person to virtual back to in-person. But let's keep moving on, talking about what's up with owning a yoga studio. So part of the reason I opened a studio was to create a community too. I wanted to teach people in person. And I also will say that was part of what was really hard about the pandemic, was that I didn't want to be teaching online classes, and it was a very emotionally and mentally taxing thing for me to pivot so much. But I also just didn't want to be teaching online classes. I wanted to teach people in person. And I kind of was like, if I had wanted to start an online business, I would have started an online business. But I wanted to focus on the in-person piece, and I didn't have interest in or a desire to figure out the online stuff. Like, the in-person stuff was hard enough. The other thing too is that, and I can't believe I haven't said this yet in this episode, one of the things about owning a yoga studio that I sort of knew, but only knew the tip of the iceberg, was that teaching yoga is the smallest and easiest part of the job. 99% of what I think about on a daily basis is not teaching yoga, right? So if you want to make a living teaching yoga, doing it as a studio owner is actually not the best way to do it, because you're worrying about everything else. You're not actually worrying a ton about yoga. So if you want to just teach at a bunch of different studios and have private clients, do retreats, do trainings, that's a way to make a living teaching yoga, not owning a studio, right? When you own a studio, there's so many other things that you have to worry about. And I sort of knew that because I had seen behind the scenes of running the admissions office that I worked at when I worked in higher education, and running new student orientation when I did that. I know how much goes into events, if you will, and owning a studio is literally one long giant event that never ends. So when I used to work in new student orientation at a university is a week to 10 days long, and at least it ends at some point, right? Owning a yoga studio is like running orientation every single day, 24/7, 365, which is kind of wild. So that's something that I've, really got to draw on my skills in the past to what I'm doing now. What does that mean? What am I thinking about on a daily basis with a yoga studio? So the first thing, and I'm going to talk every day, I'm not going to talk specifically about starting a business, but when it comes to thinking about what's going on in the studio every day. So there's very basic logistic things, right? Managing the schedule, making sure that people who are assigned and asked to teach different classes are showing up to teach those classes. So that's sort of step 1 and 2. Another piece that I'm thinking about is what's going on in the world as a whole. What season are we in? Is it vacation time? Is it back to school time? Is it January when things are going to be crazy? We live in Tennessee. We get some weird weather. Do I need to be keeping an eye on the weather for today? Is there an event happening? Because we've got football games and concerts and just all kinds of events that happen around us. Is there something that I need to think about for today? Or are there events that I'm learning about that I need to factor into the calendar for the future? Another piece I'm thinking about is, am I teaching today? Do I need to also plan a class? Am I leading a teacher training today? What do I need to think about for my schedule for that? Next, I'm also thinking about the cleanliness and the accessibility of the studio. So this kind of goes with weather too, but like in the winter, if it snows, okay, how are the sidewalks getting to the studio? How is the parking? Do we need to, like, does the heat work? Is the air conditioning working? Is the plumbing working okay? How are all the props doing? Are props getting worn out? Do we need to replace them? Do we need to wash them? I also need to think about managing my team in the terms of showing up for their classes, but also, are they teaching the classes that they've been assigned to teach in terms of, are they teaching a yin class when they're assigned to teach a yin class? Are they teaching a vinyasa class when they're assigned to teach a vinyasa class? So making sure they understand what they're teaching. Does anyone need class coverage today or for future classes? What's going on in the back end of the software? Are there any clients that are having issues with class packages? People have questions about buying memberships, people coming in for their first class, trying to find us. Another thing since we moved this year that we've thought a lot about is, are people going to the right location? For example, one of the headaches that I've had lately, and it just happens like every once in a while. So if you have tips on how to fix this, I would love your tips. But one of the things that we run into right now is that we moved. Our location is updated in Apple Maps and Google. However, every once in a while, someone who's taking an Uber or a Lyft to the studio ends up getting sent to our old location instead of the current location. So every once in a while, we have some kind of like issue with that, which is a challenge. And I still don't know how to make sure that Uber and Lyft are getting the right address. It's in our confirmation emails. It's on our website. It's on our Moments page, which is our booking platform. It's on Instagram. But every once in a while, someone still ends up in the wrong place. And that's just a thing that we have to manage. We also get inquiries very regularly for people looking for private group sessions, private individual sessions, corporate sessions, being part of events. We also just get communication from clients, whether it's questions or can you freeze my membership, or I want to bring a friend and I can't figure out how to use my guest pass. Like, things run themselves really well. And even though we have a lot of really easy to use technology, we also have stuff that comes up, right? Like questions come up, problems come up, things happen. So managing like, what inquiries are we getting to the studio right now? And to be quite frank with you, I don't have time to pour into my team the way I want to right now because I am managing a lot of these things. And I'm looking at how can I add support staff for myself so that it's not just me doing all of this. I want to be able to pour into my teachers and say to them like, hey, can you remember why you started teaching yoga? I want to be able to continue mentoring them, giving them education, helping them grow, helping them feel supported through their teaching journey, because this is so much more than just a job. This is about sharing movement and sharing a way to live a better life with our students. So how can I support my teachers as they do that? There's so much going on behind the scenes, running payroll, planning social media, communicating with teachers what's going on, communicating with our community what's going on. There are so many pieces when it comes to running a yoga studio that are so much more than teaching yoga. So it's this really interesting balance for me of remembering why I do this and also how do we do this sustainably? This is one thing that I really care about in my own personal practice and also in the business as a whole is how can we do this sustainably? So for example, it is not sustainable for me to teach more than like 3 or 4 classes a week right now because there's a lot of other things taking my energy. I think a lot of people think like, oh, if you're running a studio, you teach all the classes. no, I wouldn't have energy for anything. There are also so many incredibly talented yoga teachers on my team and in Nashville as a whole that if I hired every single talented yoga teacher that reaches out to me about whether we're hiring, we could have classes literally 12 hours straight per day. And we just don't have the need to have that many classes right now. One day would love to need to have classes from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. straight, but we don't quite need that yet. And a bigger question thinking about sustainability and growth of the business is how do we get to a point where we have more demand for classes? We want more people to come to the studio. And how do we put enough classes on the schedule that we offer enough variation in both time and type of class that people see what they want on our schedule? We want to make sure we have enough classes out there that people have options for classes to come to. We want to make sure people see our schedule and think, yeah, I can make a routine out of going there, whether it's once a week, 3 times a week, or 5 times a week. And so it makes sense for me to buy a class pack or a membership. And then finding that balance of, okay, we want to try a new class time that a few people have asked for. How do we roll this out in a sustainable way that we can put it on the schedule and it's going to stay there for a while, right? On top of all of this, life is happening too. So for example, we have one teacher who's on a maternity leave, so we had to rearrange the schedule a little bit when that happened. We have one teacher who is taking a little break from teaching right now for scheduling reasons, had to rearrange things like that. So managing the capacity of myself and all of the teachers on the team. And then there's this other interesting factor with managing a team like this where I have hired people as contractors rather than employees, but there is a range of why people teach yoga. Like obviously they do it because they love it, but some of my teachers teach full time. There's some teachers who teach a few classes a week, but also do something else. There's also some teachers who teach 1 class a week and that's all they ever want to teach. And so managing all these different groups and types of people is challenging. It's fun. It's worth it. I don't mean it all to complain, but it's just a note of knowing that this is not their sole source of income, number one, and their sole source of stress. If anything, I tell teachers, I want this to be fun for you and I want this to add value to your life. I want this to be a fun outlet for you. And at the same time, this is a business and we need to make sure we're making money, paying the bills, continuing to sustain this business so that we have a place to teach yoga. It's an interesting balance of supervising people with different types of motivations that I didn't get experience in supervising when I had, for example, students who reported to me at another job. When you have a group of part-time workers at a shop or an office or anything like that, a lot of times they have sort of a minimum and maximum set of hours and everyone's working around the same amount of time or there's a smaller range. But when you have such a range of some people teaching 1 class a week, some people teaching 5, 6, or 7, it just creates different levels of sort of knowledge and comfort in the studio, familiarity with the processes, familiarity with clients, and also just energy for it. It's just going to be different. One group is not better or worse than the other, and I want to be really clear about that. I also am really lucky to have teachers who have taught for me for so long. Like some of my teachers have been teaching for us for 5 years now, which is incredible. And I'm just so grateful to have people who stick around. And it hopefully tells me I'm doing something right, right? Like I know I have lots of room to grow as a leader and as a manager, which I do see as 2 different things, but hopefully I'm doing something right if people want to stick around with me. So making sure that whether you teach 1 class a week or 10, I want to make sure that all of us are on the same page about how we teach our classes, how we serve our students, how we show up in the studio, and what the expectations are. No matter how many classes you teach per week, you're showing up sort of equally to each other for every single class. Everyone shows up ready to go, ready to teach their class, whatever class it is. On that note too, we are a studio that does not operate in a bubble. We know that our teachers and our students have lives outside of the studio. And also just that the world is happening outside of the studio, right? There's just a lot going on in the world right now. And also in our personal lives, there's a lot going on. For example, I have a puppy, and also the puppy was a little sick the other night and got up in the middle of the night. And so we know that people bring that with them, whether they are a teacher or a student. For us, we know that stuff is happening outside of the studio. We're not one of those studios where it's like good vibes only all the time. We only want you to be happy and peppy and like all of that. We are a studio where you can show up as you are. That's very important to me for my teachers too. So if teachers are having a little bit of a slow day, I don't expect them to put on a, fake smiley face and pretend that today is the best day ever. I want my teachers to be able to show up as they are. And at the same time, I've been the person that has pushed myself to teach when I was sick and when I shouldn't have taught, and really pushed my own limits. And I don't want that for my teachers. So one of the things that's really important to me as a studio is that we take yoga really seriously, and at the same time, we hold it lightly. At the end of the day, yes, it's something serious. It's something we really love. It is an ancient practice that we are the stewards of now. And at the same time, it's just yoga. It's just a business. We're not doing brain surgery. We're not doing rocket science. We are making a positive impact, hopefully, on our world, but it is just yoga. So if we can't get a class covered, if someone's sick or gets a flat tire on the way to the studio and no one else can step in last minute, we cancel the class because it's just yoga. We tell the students about it. We give them class credit back. We communicate with them about it, but we just cancel the class because sometimes that's what you need to do. If teachers are sick, I actually expect them not to teach when they're sick because I don't want to make other people sick. And also, if teachers get to a point that their schedule isn't working for them right now, some people have held down the same class time on the same day for years, and some people have had to switch in and out all the time. And both of those are great because I rely on my teachers to share with me how they can make teaching yoga work for them right now in this season of their life. And that's part of how I run the studio and how I make the schedule. That brings up its own challenges for sure, but it's the way that feels best for me. And it's how we feel most authentic as a studio, showing up and saying, hey, so-and-so got a flat tire on the way to the studio. We have to cancel class. We're so sorry. Here's a free class to make up for this one that you missed. We'll see you next time. Another thing that I think a lot about is our role as public citizens in terms of weather cancellations. I'm pretty aggressive about canceling if there's going to be bad weather, because I think about what example are we setting about whether people should be out on the roads. So for example, if weather forecasters are saying you should stay off the roads today because it's going to be bad or what have you, let's cancel class because we don't need to contribute to people trying to be on the roads. It's how can we operate from a place of caring for other people other than just the people coming to our classes. Is it a bummer to hear that yoga is canceled today? Yes, but should you be trying to drive in Nashville when the roads are super icy? No, that's just not a really smart thing to do. And so how can I make decisions as a business owner that benefit the community as a whole? When I say the community as a whole, I don't just mean the people who come to my studio. I mean the greater city of Nashville too. So thinking bigger picture is something that's really important to me. Owning a studio is a practice of planning for as many different situations, contingencies, possibilities as possible. And then the one situation that you didn't even have on your radar that you never even would have thought could happen is actually what happens. Owning a studio or owning a business is making plans A, B, C, and D, and then situation K is what actually happens, something that wasn't even on your radar. And when that happens, sometimes the only thing you can do is just smile and laugh and vent to a friend and then say, all right, how are we going to fix it? There's a lot of problem solving. And one of the things that has been really helpful for me as a business owner is putting as many systems in place to automate the things that I know are going to come up so that I can create space for the surprises. So how can I automate the day-to-day practices of my business? How can I make sure that the business could run without me so that when I had to get my appendix out, for example, a couple of years ago, I could text my team from my hospital room and say, hey guys, I need y'all to figure this out and see how we can keep the studio open. And they did. And that is part of the power of creating a business. It's not just about creating the Kim show or this yoga studio that I have to be there to run. One of the things that I'm really proud of is that I've created something and have a team that can run it, and it does great so that I can pivot when I need to. And one of the really exciting things now, we moved this year, and our previous location that we were in, we were really struggling to get clients there. And I cannot tell you how night and day it has been to be in a new location where it's so much easier for people to get to us. I didn't realize how much time per day I was spending talking to people about how to find the studio, how to find parking, how to get there, where in the building we were, until we moved. And I'm so glad we did that. And now that it's easier for people to find us, like quite literally, now that it's easy for people to get to us and pay us, this is one thing to think about as a business owner, is how easy is it for people to pay you, right? To buy your service or your product. Now that it's easy for people to come see us, we can think bigger about, okay, so how do we want to expand? How do we want to grow? And some of that is having teacher trainings, maybe even doing multiple teacher trainings per year with different teachers too, so that it's not just me running the teacher training the whole time. Now that we are in a location that I don't have to worry so much about the day-to-day logistics of the studio, I'm thinking more about teacher trainings, the 200-hour, as well as teacher trainings, either trainings that we host at our studio or people we bring in from out of town to come do special events. Speaking of special events, what other special events can we host? What kind of private sessions can we host, or offsite events can we host? Thinking about how else I want to show up in the world and share the knowledge that I've gained from the business, like this podcast. Now that I actually have time to think bigger picture about how I want to show up as a yoga teacher, I can go back and get a YouTube channel restarted, which is something I've been working on. So not only is it about what's happening in those four walls of the studio with the teachers and the classes and the students, it's about how do we make this bigger than just the studio. And I do think you have to have the physical operation running really smoothly in order to be able to think bigger picture about where do we evolve and grow from here. And I'm excited to be at that point with Heart of Wisdom. So let me tell you a little bit about the top 3 things I've thought about this week. Number 1 is scheduling. I mean, scheduling is always the hardest thing. Trying to create a schedule of people is always moving pieces. People always need sub requests, and that's fine with me. But even this week, I've been thinking about how do we make this a little bit smoother, because I've for sure have dropped the ball on this in the past. Like there's definitely times when I forgot to update a sub in our software, and that just didn't work so well. So scheduling is always a thing that I'm thinking about. I'm thinking ahead. What does the schedule look like for the rest of this year, for the holidays? Because we take a little break during the holidays. And then how are we going to show up in January and February when people are ready to, make a new resolution? So that's number 1 of the things I've been thinking about this week. Number 2, I've been thinking about refining the order of what I'm teaching in yoga teacher training right now. We just wrapped weekend 2 of our 200-hour yoga teacher training. So I've been kind of cross-checking the topics that I want to be teaching each weekend with what did we actually cover, and readjusting, fine-tuning things based on what we've covered so far. So fine-tuning the teacher training has been a thing that's been on my mind this week. And then a third thing is just bigger picture, again, scheduling things of when people are going to need class coverage for longer periods of time, when we can schedule certain pop-up events, what does it look like to host certain workshops or trainings or immersions? What does the greater calendar look like for us as a studio over the next 6 months to a year? And then I'll add one more. The 4th thing I think a lot about is social media, partly because I enjoy it. Also because it's the best way we have for people to learn about us. I work with an amazing marketing and business consultant named Alexa Colley. She runs the Friday Society. She has a podcast. Shout out Alexa, is has been the best thing I've ever done for my business. And so if you ever want to work with Alexa, if you own a business, I highly recommend it. But I'll leave some details about that in the show notes. So I think about social media, my email marketing. I need to refresh our website a little bit. So there's just some little back end things, and then also marketing things that I've been thinking about too, of making sure I have my social media plan ready for the rest of the month. going through and making sure that my emails match what I want to be sharing, that we have plans for publicizing different trainings and events that we're doing, making sure the website is fully updated with pictures from our new space because I'm still working on that. We have a lot of pictures from our old space and I'm just combing through the website, making sure the website is the most up to date that it can be. And then just refreshing parts of the website that need a refresh. So those have been the biggest things on my mind this week. I think I said I was going to tell you the top 3 things, and that's approximately the top 5. And that's life as a business owner is you say that you have 2 things on your to-do list one day, and then you get a text or a phone call and you realize you have 5 completely different things on your to-do list. And those 2 things that you thought you had just get bumped off the list. So that's a little bit about what's up with owning a yoga studio. Some big picture thoughts. Number 1, I have used the skills that I learned in previous jobs working for higher education in this role way more than I thought I would. Number 2, I have figured out how to gather information. And like I said, I shouted out Alexa, but I have figured out how to ask questions and figure things out on my own or lean on people to help me, where to find help, where to find support. And then we've also figured out who not to listen to for advice. You have to know what you don't want just as much as what you do want. And that's been really important to me in running this studio. Another piece is just continuing to think about and reconnect to my why behind things. So I want this to be a sustainable business as a whole. And I also want this to be a sustainable lifestyle for me. I want my practice to be sustainable for me. I want to be able to take breaks and then pivot to different projects. And that's really important to me. And that's been something I've been able to do lately for a lot of different reasons. Most of all, I want people to see yoga as a lifestyle. I want people to realize you don't have to be flexible to do yoga. You don't have to have this cute little outfit. You don't have to have a yoga mat. You can show up in jeans. We have literally had people show up to our studio in jeans. You can show up however you are. And we are a space for you to practice. How do we show up and how do we allow people to show up with us? What kind of a space are we? What kind of community and what kind of presence are we creating? Right? Like, I think bigger picture about, okay, are we welcoming, inclusive, accessible? Are we educating people? Are we helping people feel better in their bodies? That's really important to me and something I keep thinking about week in and week out. So that's a little bit about running a yoga studio. It has been the hardest thing I've ever done. It has also been the best thing I've ever done. And even with all the challenges that I've faced in the last 5.5 years of owning this studio, I wouldn't have it any other way and I wouldn't do it any differently. I mean, yeah, there are some things I would do differently along the way, but every step that we took has gotten me to where we are today, has gotten us to where we are today. And I've met some really, really, really incredible people through Heart of Wisdom, through being an entrepreneur. I feel like I've also really grown into who I am as a person. I've learned what's important to me. I've learned about how I want to show up in the world for myself and others. And that is just the greatest gift that I never imagined that this studio could give me. So I'm just really, really, really proud of what I've done, proud of the team that I have, grateful for the team that I have, grateful for the students that we have, and just so, so happy and grateful that I get to share yoga for a living. My ultimate goal is to help people feel better in their bodies and live a little bit easier life. Life is hard enough. How can I help you make each day just a little bit easier? So that's a little bit about running a yoga studio. And owning a yoga studio. I have so many other thoughts that I could share, but I'm curious what's interesting to you. You can always request topics for the podcast at howyoga.co/podcast. Make sure you subscribe, rate, review, follow, all the things. If you liked this episode, share it with a friend. And that's this week's episode of the What's Up with Yoga podcast. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. And I can't wait to chat next time.